Welcome to IDERA Virtual Education. In this video, we're going to talk about adding instances, databases, etc. to SQL Secure. And I say etc. because, these days there's a lot of different options that people have to run SQL Server databases, right? You can have on-prem instances, you can have cloud-based instances, you can have cloud-based databases. SQL Secure generally can cover most, if not everything out there. When you want to add a new object, a new instance, new database to SQL Secure, under the File menu, you'll say Register SQL Server. And on the next tab will give you a drop-down list of what we can cover. Now, on-prem is pretty wide open. So if it's either an instance inside your actual data center, or you may have a secondary cloud hosting provider that's offering you a virtual machine in their cloud, generally we would mark that as an on-prem. In a similar fashion, Azure virtual machines work as almost as if they're on-prem. That being said, you have some different authentication opportunities there. Azure Active Directory, for example, any kind of Azure database, so managed instance database as a service would be covered. EC2, again, very similar to an Azure virtual machine, except obviously hosted through Amazon, and then RDS would be supported as well. So when you're adding, for example, an Azure database, normally I just recommend put in the same server name that you would put into Management Studio to get this thing going, right? So whatever you put into Management Studio, if that's working for you, it should work as well within SQL Secure. You can always encrypt the connection. I think a lot of people will do that when they're talking across the WAN, but if you have a VPN in place and you have a direct pipe into Azure, I don't necessarily think that would be necessary. You do have two different credential options for an Azure database. You could either use Azure Active Directory, or you can use SQL Server authentication. Now, once the server's been added, there are some things that you may want to play with as far as configuration. For example, filtering. Filtering is really, at least by default, not in place. The idea here is that there may be certain databases or certain objects that you don't necessarily need to track within your data collections. This can save you time, it can also save you space, it can free up noise from reporting, so there's different reasons why you may want to do this. Do keep in mind though, if you just run with the default rule, that means we don't filter anything out. You're going to be collecting all the data that is available. But if you do want to create a new filter, the goal here is, we'll just call it demo. The goal here is for you to have the opportunity to specify exactly what you're after, right? So do you want to audit all the databases within the environment, or maybe it's just the user, or maybe it's just the system, or the system and the user? You also can do name matching, both through specifically marking the databases that you're after, and or you can use wildcards at the bottom to either filter in or out which databases you care to see, right? Tables, views, functions, assemblies, keys, full text catalogs, all those are different options that you can either decide to collect data on or not collect data on. The other thing that you will want to be conscious of is the data collection intervals themselves. SQL Secure is not one of those packages that's designed to collect data in real time 24/7. That's not really the purpose of this tool. The main purpose of this tool is to give you reportable metrics around both server control configuration, so are your SQL Server databases and instances meeting the controls that you specified, and then secondly, effective permissions and permissions analysis reporting, right? So really understanding who has access to what. For the most part, most of our customers are going to stick with the default, which is a weekly data collection. So, you can certainly ramp that up. You can run that daily. You can run it every minute if that's what you choose to. But I think, again, most people are going to run this during off-peak hours, probably on a weekend, once a week, maybe even once a month, once a quarter. Once that data has been gathered, it's all stored in a repository. The other thing that you want to be conscious of is the retention of those snapshots. I think 10,000 is 17 years or something like that, 10,000 days. So I'm keeping this history for a very long time. It's a weekly snapshot over many, many years. But the benefit there is that I can go back and do a delta comparison. What did the permissions look like, or the server configuration look like 3 weeks ago as compared to now? Also report off of what was happening, 2 months ago, when, a breach or something maybe occurred that you want to figure out. As long as you have the history in the repository, we can still report on that. And then the other little side note, which is pretty basic, but the idea is that we can notify you if there was any kind of finding, for example, that was of high value. If you notice behind me, I got some what we would consider high risk findings against some of these SQL servers, and I've indicated that I want to know about any high risk finding. It may be that I want to see the high and medium risk, which would be anything yellow or red that comes back, or any risk, which would be blue, yellow, or red, so low, medium, and high. You don't necessarily have to be notified if any kind of security findings were found, I guess, during our snapshots, but certainly that is something that you can do. The other idea around notification is whether or not the snapshots were successful, right? So only notify on error. There may be some warnings in a snapshot. There may be a permission that was there that wasn't there before, that is preventing you from collecting the data that you need. That can sometimes generate a warning error. An error message, though, is generally something egregious, right? So you did not have any permission to do the data analysis. We couldn't find the SQL Server to do the data gathering that we need to do, those sorts of things. So, and you can also just be notified that we were successful, right? Notify me every time we do a snapshot. So notifications are also part of that, adding an instance to SQL Secure, or adding a database to SQL Secure. The last piece of this puzzle is policies. And if you're brand new to the product, you probably don't have any policies already in the tool other than what we call all servers policy. That will be there out of the box. But as you work with the tool and you generate and create policies, if you already have them predefined, you can assign the appropriate ones to these servers, and you can multi-select. So each instance could be associated with different policies as required. So that's really how you would walk through the process of adding a database or an instance or a managed instance to SQL Secure. Thank you for your time.